Most rock legends walk onto a late-night stage and play it cool. They've got the look, the resume, the carefully managed image built over decades. And then there's Flea, who walked onto The Tonight Show with a bandage on his head and within 5 minutes had confessed something he'd been carrying since he was 11 years old. Something he'd never said on camera before. Something that made the entire audience erupt. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, reminded millions of people that the most powerful thing a person can do is simply tell the truth about them. If you need a Flea introduction, here it is. Fast. You would hate a Flea. Born Michael Balzary in Melbourne, Australia in 1962. Raised in New York and then Los Angeles. Bassist and co-founder of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. One of the most successful rock bands in history. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, regarded by many musicians as one of the greatest bass players alive. Known for playing barefoot, shirtless, upside down, and at a volume that could rearrange your internal organs. He is 63 years old and has more energy than most people half his age. He is also, and this matters for the story, always been unusually honest. Not the curated honesty of a publicist-approved interview. The real kind. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't follow the script. He wrote a memoir in 2019 called Acid for the Children that covered his chaotic, difficult childhood with a frankness that surprised even longtime fans. So when Flea showed up on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon with a bandage on his head and an expression that said, "Oh, you want to know what happened?" Nobody should have been surprised by what came next. But they were anyway. Here's the story, exactly as Flea told it. He was doing a radio show for Apple Music. During a short break, 3 minutes, he said before they went back on air, he sprinted to the bathroom down the hallway. Full sprint. Because that's how Flea does things. And at the end of that hallway, a glass door, which he did not see. He hit it flat on, face first, full speed, landed on his back. Blood coming from his head. Lying on the floor of a radio station hallway, looking up at the ceiling, his first thought, and he said this, was, "I've got the Fallon show in a few days." Not, "Am I okay?" Not, "Someone call a doctor." The Fallon show, that is either dedication or the specific kind of brain that belongs to a person who has been in a rock band for 40 years. Possibly both. He walked out on that Tonight Show stage with the bandage still on. Jimmy Fallon noticed immediately, and instead of deflecting, instead of giving some vague answer about a minor accident, Flea leaned into it completely. He called it a peeing accident. He described the whole thing in vivid detail. He did not spare himself any dignity, and the audience loved him for it. But here's where it gets strange, because Flea didn't stop there. After the bathroom story landed, after the laughs, after the chaos, he paused, and he said something that nobody in that room expected. He said, "Strangely enough, this is not my first peeing accident." And then he told the truth. He wet the bed until he was 11 or 12 years old. For a kid, he said, that caused him no shortage of embarrassment. Then, and this is the part that people are still talking about, he turned it into something else entirely. He looked into the camera and he said, "I just want to let you know, all of you out there in TV land, all you bedwetters, I am one of you. You are not alone." He described what it feels like. Waking up at a sleepover, realizing what happened, the specific particular shame of that moment that so many kids carry for years in silence, and he said, "I know what that's like, and I turned out okay." That shift from comedy to genuine connection happened in about 30 seconds, and the reaction online was immediate. Comments started flooding in the moment the clip hit the internet. People weren't just laughing, they were moved. "This is exactly why we love Flea," one person wrote. "Protect Flea at all costs," said another. Someone compared him to Chuck Norris as a compliment in the specific internet language that means this person has achieved mythic status. And underneath all the humor was something real. Bedwetting in childhood is more common than most people realize. Medical literature consistently shows it affects a significant percentage of children, and the shame associated with it is often disproportionate to the actual experience. Kids internalize it, they avoid sleepovers, they carry it into adulthood as a private embarrassment that nobody talks about. Then, a 63-year-old rock legend on one of the most watched late-night shows in America just said it out loud, casually, humorously, without shame. That's not a small thing. There is a specific kind of power that comes from someone who has achieved what Flea has achieved. The Hall of Fame, the decades of success, the cultural legacy, choosing to use that platform to say, "Here is something embarrassing about me, and I am fine, and so are you." It costs him nothing, and it means something to someone watching alone at home who has carried that specific embarrassment for longer than they'd like to. Here is the thing about Flea that this moment illustrates, and that his whole career has illustrated. He has never performed a version of himself that is safer than the one. About what that takes over the course of a 40-year public career. Most people in the public eye spend enormous energy managing their image, controlling the narrative, making sure the version of themselves that the world sees is polished, strategic, and protected. Lee has always done the opposite. He played bass shirtless and barefoot before it was a brand. He wrote a memoir that talked honestly about his difficult childhood, a mother who struggled, a stepfather who was volatile, a kid who found music because everything else felt unstable. He has talked about sobriety, about therapy, about the ongoing work of trying to be a better person than the circumstances he came from prepared him to be. Now, at 63, with a Hall of Fame induction and a legacy that is entirely secured, he sits on a late-night couch and tells the world he peed the bed until he was almost a teenager, not because he had to, not because someone asked, because a kid somewhere is going to see that clip and feel less alone. That is a choice. A deliberate, generous, unnecessary choice. It says everything about who this person actually is. Now here's the part of the Flea story that most of the coverage of this Tonight Show appearance missed entirely. Because the bathroom accident and the childhood confession were not why he was there. Flea is in the middle of one of the most unexpected creative pivots of any musician his generation. After more than 4 decades as one of rock's defining bass voices, he is releasing a jazz album. Not a rock album with jazz influence. Not a side project that sounds like RHCP with a saxophone. Genuine jazz record called Honora, released March 27, 2026. On this album, Flea plays trumpet and bass, instruments that require completely different technical approaches. He recorded it with a backing band of actual jazz musicians, and his collaborators on the record include Thom Yorke, the frontman of Radiohead, and Nick Cave of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Think about that lineup for a moment. Flea, Thom Yorke, Nick Cave. Jazz album. That is not a commercial calculation. That is an artist in his 60s following his first love. He has spoken about his passion for jazz going back to his childhood, regardless of whether it makes sense to anyone else. He is also planning a solo tour to support the album. A solo tour, separate from Red Hot Chili Peppers. At 63, with a bandaged head and apparently no reduction in energy whatsoever. There is a version of a rock legend at 63 that looks like carefully managed legacy maintenance. Greatest Hits tour, the controlled interviews, the brand that has been so carefully built that nothing can touch it. And then there is Flea, who walks onto The Tonight Show with a head wound from a bathroom accident, who tells 30 million people he wet the bed as a child, who then goes home and finishes a jazz album with Thom Yorke. There is something genuinely rare about a person who has achieved everything there is to achieve in their field, and who is still visibly just doing exactly what they want to do. Not for approval, not for the algorithm, not because it makes strategic sense, because it's honest, because it connects, because somewhere out there a kid is watching that clip and laughing and feeling for the first time about something they've been embarrassed about for years. Like maybe it's okay. Flea said it himself, "You are not alone." Coming from a 63-year-old rock legend with a bandaged head and a jazz album dropping this month, that lands, and if you haven't seen the clip, go find it. You'll understand why the internet called him. Let me know what you think.